to yet another Map Your Show webinar. This time we're going to go over some conferencing tips and how to prepare speakers for success at a conference or event once they get there. The good news is that I will not be doing most of the talking through this, at least hopefully if all goes well. But I am the person that gets to kind of set the stage there. So for those of you who don't know me, and that is obviously a lot of folks, my name's Justin Post. I am Regional Vice President here at Map Your Show. And I'm joined by a couple of colleagues. Well, I guess I'll call you friends at this point, although it's not like we've hung out socially a ton. We'll get to them in a second. Let me just sort of set up with all of the basics that if you have ever attended a webinar or watched a recording, get set at the beginning regardless. So yes, this is being recorded. We're going to upload this later to our resource center sidekick, make the link available obviously to those that have registered. So we'll have some different ways for you to access this if you want to send it to colleagues or whatnot. We're probably going to keep this right around 30-40 minutes total. I know we sort of build it around an hour, but at least for me, when I go to jump on, and whether it's view a recording or whatever, and you see something over an hour, that just seems really long. So bear with us. We're going to try to keep this moving as quick as we can to get to a bunch of different content. To that point, one of the benefits of joining this live is that if you have questions, you're more than welcome to submit them to us. You don't have to wait till the end to see if we covered the content. Just throw it in there. And if we're going to get to it later, great. If it's something we have to answer offline, fine. But we'll do our best to try to interact and make this somewhat enjoyable between now and then. And honestly, to that point, the goal here is, really, if you can just find one or two things out of this that might be helpful or that you didn't think about ahead of time, great. I realize our guests here and their events may not be exactly what yours are, but that's okay. You're going to hear all sorts of concepts and stuff thrown around to help with that. So without further ado, let me turn it over. And by way of arbitrary coin flip in my head here, Val, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. Maybe a quick introduction, sort of explanation of all the stuff that you have done. And then from there, Josh, we'll throw it over to you and jump right in.
Great. Hi, I'm Valerie. I have been working with the NAB show for 6 years or so at this point. I had originally been working full-time for the company, am now contracting through my company, Chisel Brand, LLC. And my background is primarily as a web developer designer. And because of the nature of Map Your Show with all its databases, kind of found myself pulled into their world and have been highly involved in almost all aspects, maybe not as much on the exhibitor side of things, sales and all of that, but definitely on anything attendees are looking at. So all of that. And then also the speaker care work that we'll talk through today. Really, I'm more on the web database side of things, whereas Josh is dealing more with the people in the program. So I hand it over to you, Josh.
Well, thank you, Valerie. And you're absolutely right. So I am Josh Miely. I'm Vice President of Content Strategy and Development for NAB Show. I have been with our company, the National Association of Broadcasters, for the past 16 years. I came up through radio. I was on radio for a while and sold radio and did promotions in radio, transitioned to NAB where I programmed radio education, and then that morphed into television education as well, and has now morphed into the imprint design for everything and all that we do. And yes, more forward-facing in what I do and sourcing with the speakers and working with Val and Justin, who are both experts in helping make our back-end platforms work for them, work easier. And, together as a trio, we make decisions that hopefully make it better and easier for them to have a great experience with us in the lead up to, and then once they get on stage at the shows.
I appreciate that, Josh. I'm not often called an expert, so thank you. I don't know that I take that yet, but we'll see maybe by the end of this. Josh, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about the events. I know a lot of folks know NAB show in Vegas, but between that and New York, sort of what the conferences are, who the audience is, who's consuming this info, what are you doing all the work for on the nowadays?
Absolutely. So NAB hosts NAB show and NAB show New York. Those are our two tentpole events. One happening in April in Las Vegas, that's NAB show New York, happening at the Javits Center in New York City every October. And really, they are the culmination points for the media, entertainment, and technology industries to come together, talk over latest topics and trends, and really push those industries forward with an enormous exhibit floor in Las Vegas where a lot of business gets done. So, as far as, size scope, we're top 10 across the board, largest media entertainment technology show in the US and the world is NAB show. And really it is that point where what happens from film to TV to radio and all the ancillaries that kind of fill in and around that and all the technologies behind it, our shows are where those things push forward.
Awesome. And Val, I'll sort of kick it over to you. There are other folks that go into the prep of these conferences, obviously, as much as you both do. How annoying would it be to give us just like a brief overview of whether it's some of the co-located conferences, some of the different stuff that sort of happens, and maybe some other stakeholders and the size and scope of what that looks like?
So the shows, especially the Vegas show, but New York to a smaller degree, is programmed by a bunch of different partners, and then also our internal teams, again, which is made up of all sorts of different people. So one of the big challenges we have is a lot of times, there's a single conference at a show and it's very easy. Our show is not like that at all. We have a bunch of different conferences that all require different passes, and are programmed by different sets of people. And we have some speakers that speak across multiple conferences and other ones that are coming only for our post-production world conference, for instance, and they are very siloed and only dealing with that piece. We'll speak to kind of what that means later, but I do think that as we talk about things, it is helpful for you all to understand that when we're talking about partners, it's us talking about these kind of co-located conferences. And we have, gosh, I don't even know, Josh, like maybe 10, 12 different conferences happening throughout the show. So it's very complicated, but we've made it work.
Sure. No, agreed. So we're going to jump into the weeds, right? I know that's why people are on this, is to talk through all the prep and stuff that happens there. But I sort of want to turn this on its head, and we're going to start right away with what hopefully is your best advice through this. We'll see, and you're allowed to pass on this if you want for now, if you want to cover it later. But Josh, let me start with you. So if someone was watching this and they're 8 minutes in now, what you think the most important aspect of making the conference session successful once folks get on site? This is a lot of pressure.
No, and listen, it's a great question. It's a good opening question, and the answer has, and I think anybody watching who's kind of in a position like me will have the same answer, has kind of nothing to do with all the back end stuff we're kind of talking about and all the logistics. Like, you get all that set so you get the person on stage. When it comes to it, preparation and personality of that person on stage is key, right? The best sessions that I've had, they're people that understand, yes, it's an educational moment, but there's an audience, which means it's an entertainment moment. So ideally it's infotainment. So I've had, a person who I love working with who sources sessions that when he brings in, for instance, a couple of morning shows for a radio show, he sits out and he walks around in the audience with his microphone, and you can tell that he has planned out this whole hour, has talked through it with everybody on stage, what question I'm going to ask you, why I'm going to ask you that question, what we want to get out of it, and has played that whole hour out in his head, or at least the 45 minutes before Q&A, to really make it a full engaging moment and lean in section of education and information that everybody gets. Those are the best sessions. That's what you want to get to. Listen, when you're doing hundreds of sessions, it's tough to get to that point. You can only relay it and hope so much. And listen, sometimes you've got some dense content that's going to be there, that it's going to be 25 PowerPoint slides on a latest technology, and you can't always get to that. But when I see a home run session, it's because there's storytelling involved, and start to finish, everything's been thought about.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And again, I'm going to point out the obvious here. Sometimes you hop on these webinars and you have these questions, and then the guests start to talk about how great the software and whatever the person is hosting the goal of this, as you just saw, like, that has nothing to do with Map Your Show. That is what, we are going to talk a little bit of Map Your Show here, I promise. But that is overall what we're hoping you get. But Val, to that point, I know, maybe more on the back end setup, you may want to talk about Map Your Show, but if you have other tips, by all means, is there like hey, here's your most important piece?
Yeah, I think to me, I like the baseline is helping people get what they need quickly so that attendees can find the sessions, and so that speakers know what they're supposed to do and where they're supposed to be. So like, it's not sexy, not maybe as kind of lovely as what Josh was talking about. But to me, I really think it is doing that work ahead of time to make sure that people are there when they need to be there, that they understand the technology requirements, so that if they do have a PowerPoint or a video presentation, that all of that stuff is in and done ahead of time. Everybody knows what they need, so that when you are on site, you can just focus on, oh, here's this really good question and all of that stuff. But doing the really ugly grunt work ahead of time so that you are prepared and able to just hit the ground running once you're on site.
Sure. No, I love it. All right, let's run into some stuff here. We're gotta, maybe let's start with an example question, and then we're gonna sort of chronologically walk through what all you do before you get on site. Josh, you referenced both NAB New York and NAB Show. Do you change things up between the two, and have you seen pros or cons and experimenting with things? How does that sort of work? Because obviously with when those events are, one kind of rolls into the next year after year, and how different, can you set some of those up and try some things out?
Yeah, listen, we don't try to reinvent the wheel fully every time, because we got a good thing going, kind of with Map Your Show, right? And with everything that we've said, but we always are trying to streamline workflows and make a good thing even better. And the way we do that is using the New York show to test case some things, because whereas, Valerie had mentioned we'll have 10 to 12 partners with us in Las Vegas and any number of other verticals that kind of beget out that, if you wanted to come to that show, there's probably 20 different angles at which you could come in and find different education. In New York, that's probably like 8 to 10. So it's a bit smaller of a scale. And we just see what works for our people, because it's a smaller source of people, and then try to apply that to Las Vegas. And I think one of our big changes that we've made kind of leading into Vegas of this year is we've been doing a lot of various modules on the back end, right? In order to be able to have things specific for our partners and make it easier for them. What we found though is on the front end, and what we see on the website and what Valerie expertly puts together, is sometimes that makes things a bit confusing for our attendees. And we're making the strategic switch this year to go from, I think, 6 or 7 modules last year down to 3 for this year, so that front end experience for the attendees, that, selling opportunity and then information opportunity for once they've decided they're coming and are going to come on site, is that much easier and sleeker for them. Because at the end of the day, you just don't want to confuse people.
Sure.
Trade shows can be just like, we'll say, amusement parks, and you can get confusing in where you want to go. We want to make it as simple as possible. Got it.
No, it's good. And I'll sort of restate some of that again, just from my standpoint in the Map Your Show software piece. So to sort of set the stage, some of you on this and or watching the recording might be aware that Map Your Show has a platform that allows you to collect data from interested speakers, or to create a portal for them to log into to complete different information updates, and then ultimately show it off, stuff like that. What Josh is describing is that in the past we had, and I'm going to call them co-located conferences, I don't know that that's the best piece for you all specifically, but there were multiple setups in there with multiple distinct data collection forms and portals and potential review processes, and all that was great from a data collection standpoint. In some cases, it doesn't move its way to maybe where you want to manipulate it on the front end and displaying it to your attendees, and even to some of the folks that haven't registered yet. So let's sort of start back at square one, right? So before your speakers are on site and they have a super successful event where they're doing the Q&As that you talked about, Josh, and whatnot, let's talk a little bit about the data collection. So Val, how have you all sort of determined to set this up this year? Maybe the pros and cons of why you've done it that way, and sort of what that means on your end.
Yeah, so I like Josh said, we've been doing a lot of trial and error and figuring things out since we started using the modules for various things. And kind of how we've settled into things this year is we need a separate module if the conference needs their own separate call for speakers, or if the partner really requires their own back-end access, because we don't want them to see all of the conferences. There's been some cases where it's been, not wanting them to see other speaker emails. So that's really like where we are. And then we have one partner, Future Media Conferences, who programs usually, I think in last year, it was 6 different conferences and a bunch of workshops. So they just had a lot of content that was their own thing. So we had, given them kind of their own module. But as Josh said, this year, we've really just got the 3 chunks. One conference because they have their own call for speakers, that FMC bucket because they have so much content, and then this other bucket to house everything else. So that's kind of how we've made those determinations for what we need to modularize, make a module. I don't know.
I like it. I'm not sure if it's a word, but I'm not an expert on vocabulary, so that's fine. Let me, and again, I know I'm sort of restating, but just trying to frame it in a way. So in some cases, you have some data collection forms where you're just kind of sending out to what you think might be an interested audience or people that may want to pitch NAB on having their session or speaker at the event. And then in other cases, it's more of a curated piece. Am I hearing that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So yeah, it's again, we've got lots of moving parts and everyone's functioning differently. But basically the different modules allow us to kind of deal with some of those different needs in different ways.
And in theory, you could ask different questions, do all sorts of stuff there. Josh, I know there's a few different stakeholders, whether it's, and again, I'm not going to use the right nomenclature here, but partner organizations or, other folks that you, how do you all handle like, hey, all right, a conference just ended, whether it's NAB New York, NAB show. What is the sort of mechanics, the not so sexy behind the scenes stuff look like for you all to kind of get feedback, do all of that, and then to communicate to whether it's a Map Your Show or another vendor out there, sort of what you're thinking about doing from then on forward?
Yeah, it's just a constant conversation and communication process. Coming out of a show, we've got a debrief to see what worked, what didn't. Then we start talking with you guys to see what the art of the possible is, kind of converse and decide within our organization what we think the best pivot is. Again, as Valerie's been saying, everybody's got different needs, but the need that everybody always has is to make sure they can relay the information that needs to be presented to audiences ahead of people showing up in the simplest way and make it as easy for everybody as they can.
Sure.
Excuse me.
That's good.
Yeah.
You're fine. And then again, live question came in great. These are awesome. Keep sending these in. I'll attempt to answer it here. We can obviously follow up if we need to. So essentially when we mentioned module, I know that's a nebulous term in terms of software and whatever, but it's essentially having, I'll call them buckets instead of modules, a full-blown application process with specific questions that you need to review and determine that piece there. And then almost like a copy of that under some sort of separate heading. And frankly, we have clients that will sometimes break it out by track, where we need to ask these questions for track A or these questions for track B, or even have different groups of reviewers within there. Now, again, to Valerie's point, we're going to get to this in a second, some of that as you're weighing how many of those, like, sure, in some cases you might want 12 unique, sets of applications or questions or collection pieces there. But how is that then going to interact on the front end, especially if you have folks that are spanning those 12 setups or things like that? So again, great question. Keep those coming here as we do this. So, all right, let's get into the actual selection piece. And I don't need you guys to go like too far into the weeds here. And to be honest, this may be more of a Josh question. I'm not really sure. You guys can chime in here, but what sort of goes into, for the ones where you are selecting people or trying to curate, like, obviously you're looking for people that did great the year before or other folks there, but what are some other considerations as you are determining who's going to speak at the conference and who's not?
I'll jump in quick, just speaking to Map Your Show, give you a little love here. But there is a really nice kind of evaluation tool. So for one of our programs, we have a set of industry experts that are part of a review panel. And so we've built in evaluation questions, and that team goes through and reviews, it's paper format. So they go and read these papers to figure out if it is worthwhile for conference material. And then the Map Your Show system, because it's all database and beautiful, kind of chunks it all together, and you can do pretty math and figure out, oh, these are the ones that have gotten the highest ratings across these various categories that we've done. And then when that team is looking to actually program the event, they've got all this really beautiful data that they can sort and manage to say, okay, well, these are the best 5 papers that we have on topic X. This is going to make for a really great combination session. So that conference, we really do use the Map Your Show system to help make some of those determinations. Josh is a little more softy in the selection process. So I'll let you speak to that stuff.
Well, we softies, I guess it's soft serve ice cream as opposed to the hard rock that you find 3 months later that's been sitting in the back of your freezer, right? No, we're data driven and insight led, and it's really guided by the trends and topics that we determine for the show. So once we've got those trends and topics and we have our various partners in place or our internal stakeholders who are going to then source whatever inventory we've decided and determined or focused on those, then it's reaching out to the bevy of contacts that we or the partner have to see what we can source best, and from a subjective standpoint, what we think is going to move the needle and progress things. We have a various host of different committees across the various broadcast entities. We do a very general call for speakers that's not tied to the one track, just in order to source different ideas and have new contacts that we can reach out to. But I would say it's soft serve because it's a nebulous process as we go along. And I think it needs to be. I mean, I think, we're not putting together a widget here. We're trying to bring people together to have the right conversations, and those change drastically year to year and even change in the run up. Like I would say that last year in November of 2022, AI was still, a Will Smith movie and something that was doing back end stuff in the AWS commercials during the Who Dey Cincinnati Bengals games. And then January hit and AI was the greatest thing in the world, and we have to talk about it 24/7 or else our show is irrelevant. So you've just got to be nimble.
No, it's interesting. So let me, and I'll appreciate the Bengals reference. Thank you. Let me ask a question that I should know the answer to. I legitimately don't, so apologies. What does your post-show feedback piece look like to gather on some of the speakers? Obviously, you guys can't be in every room watching every session throughout any of your events. So what does that process sort of look like? And do you share any of that with them? Is that used for future years, or is that not used at all? And I should have never brought that up.
No, it's 100% used. There are probably, I would say, and Val, you can hone the number a bit better, but 40 or 50 debriefs across various partners, both internal and external, that happen, that get highly detailed and then get looked back upon as we go through for the build out for whether they're doing something for the next show and on the calendar, being at Vegas or New York, or the next iteration of whatever show they were just at.
Got it. All right, let's get into the actual prep. Sorry. So as your speakers, right, whether you've selected them yet, things like that, you are getting to the point where you're kind of firming some things out. Valerie, I know there is a speaker portal that Map Your Show helps power to have speakers log into and click on and do different things. What are your general goals within there? What are you trying to accomplish? Whether it's 4 months out from the event, 1 month out, what does that sort of look like for you?
Yeah, here, and I'll even share my screen to show the pretty. But
Sure.
we have really come a long way, I think, in this piece the last few years. But we spend a lot of time working with making sure that we have everything set up so the speakers have everything they need in advance of the event. So this includes, we use a tool called Orchestrate for the actual presentation, so they can upload that stuff ahead of time. When someone brings a USB drive in, that's great, but sometimes it doesn't work. So having it in advance, already loaded into the system, we do have that ability here. Within the Map Your Show system, we do ask the speakers to update and put their own information in. Again, sometimes this works better than others, depending on who the speaker is and all of that, which I'm sure Josh can speak to as well. But also, we've got partners and we've got some contractors that help us make sure we get everything in that we need in. And through the Map Your Show system, there are also ways to say, oh, we never actually got this element from this person. So let's make sure we get these headshots in for these speakers. So using the system to do that, give them all the reg information they need, provide assets, allow them to upload their handouts. And I don't even know if it's going to be on here because this is old, but the speaker release form is also on here, which especially with doing all the recordings and getting everything online is ultra important. So we really do make use of this piece. And one of the other things that we have the ability to do because of the Map Your Show system is, depending on the track that someone is assigned to, these beautiful cards here, we can add or remove cards. So if we have something very specific we want to say to people that are part of our broadcast engineering and IT conference, for example, which has this paper component, we can add a special card for them with guidelines on how that paper needs to appear in order for it to be added into the drive that attendees get as part of that. So yeah, we make great use of this portal, and I think it's been useful to the speakers in their pre-show prep, in helping them be as prepared as possible for on-site.
Okay, God, let me ask sort of a follow-up. And again, this is a question I should probably know. I don't. It's always dangerous asking those. You mentioned the speaker release form. Is that separate from do you have another contract that you have folks fill out, whether it's in Map Your Show or not, for some of the speakers, all of the speakers? What else signatures do you need from someone before they can actually show up on site?
It's really just that release form is what it comes down to. And that's, so we can take your picture and, you get quoted in various things, or if we film, that we're covered in that regard. And having it in that portal is perfect. Listen, the portal is amazing because it's a one-stop shop. You can also highlight certain things throughout the run as to when they should do what. And it's easy to articulate what's needed, but we've done a really good job, and I lean on Val for this and give her all the credit of making it easily digestible, right? Like that's the toughest thing when people come to various different websites, is if it's tough to do and it's outside of the usual internet intuitivity that we have, if that's a word, as we run around a website, then it frustrates people, and we don't want that, right? We want people to feel like, oh, I totally get everything that's here, and maybe there's a little bit extra that I don't necessarily need, but the 4 things I did were here, and I feel comfortable and good to go.
Sure. No, that's good. All right, let's jump into this again. Some of the more of the semantics, still prepping these folks before they get on site. How do you communicate when and where they need to be and whatnot? I mean, is it literally as simple as email, or is there more that goes into? And I don't know who to direct this to specifically, so apologies.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in and start from the top end, and then Val can fill in the nitty gritty and certain things. It's dependent upon partner, right? Like there are some people that are still very traditionalist and have figured out the easiest way to communicate with their people is just through literal inbox email. The system allows for general mass emails for some of those people that are coming to speak in some of the wider conferences that we have, or some of our floor education where it's free and we source a whole lot of it. We're able to build out those templates. We've got some contractors that help and do some speaker care for us, which is really specific and great. And then, tools wise, everybody, whether it's Doodle or something like that, that's the biggest thing, is you're trying to prep, your calls leading into to get everybody set on stage is doing that, which I know none of what I just said is earth shattering, but it's just, if you're missing any of those, you're making your life a little bit tougher. Isn't that right, Valerie?
Yeah, well, and honestly, I'd even say some of the big names that we get on the main stage are even phone calls, and like very analog meetings with their reps and all of that. So yeah, I think you're right that it definitely varies on the partner and the speaker and the needs of whatever program. But we do make a lot of use of the email tools within the Map Your Show system. Again, there are all these fields you can select so that you're only emailing people that are part of this track who haven't yet uploaded a headshot and are speaking, on this topic. And we can specifically send an email targeted to that group only within the system, and then see who's opened it or not, to then follow up with those people that haven't. Making use of those tools as we can too.
No, I appreciate it. And then that, kind of rolls in there. Then there's reporting on those emails, I guess I should mention too, right? To see who's open, click, things like that, whatever. There's also reporting on who's viewing stuff online on the mobile app. So we've now gotten to the point where you have communicated whatever you need to. We're publishing this to attendees. Again, could be a few weeks, could be a few months out from the event. There obviously is the Map Your Show director, and if you're watching this, you're probably somewhat familiar with the fact that we can show off speakers, sessions, exhibitors, products, floor plans, things like that on there. I will just mention, since we were sort of talking about reporting, you can see who has viewed what sessions are within there through any of the reports. If we can talk about registration integrations to where people have to register for specific sessions, that we're bringing those into our system and not just letting people add them willy-nilly through the Map Your Show piece. But if you are letting people add them, you can sort of gauge who has favorited or has bookmarked certain sessions in there. What else are you doing from a website standpoint, Val? Because I know the NAB team kind of uses our API maybe in a slightly different way than some other events, which we would welcome you to do. That's what the API exists for. It's your events data that's sitting out there waiting for you to do whatever with it. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this was actually a big thing that I've been championing, and I'm really think has made a big difference. So really trying to use our website as a marketing tool, and then use Map Your Show as a planning tool, and really kind of thinking of those as two separate entities, and trying to market on our end that the Map Your Show tool, that is your planning tool, especially now that it's also our app that they use on site, as well as their thing while they're trying to figure out what they want to attend, and which exhibitors they want to see and all of that. But we have hooked up to the API, as Justin referenced, so that we're pulling a copy of all of the sessions, speakers, exhibitors, and I think products that are in the Map Your Show system as a copy onto our website. So when we have a page about Conference X, we can say, hey, here are all of the speakers that are participating as a part of that conference with their headshots. And here are, the highlighted sessions, the 5 that we wanted to highlight. So that on our site, we're kind of giving people a glimpse and a glimmer of kind of what it is. So if they are at the decision-making point of, is this worth registering for, we're giving them enough to make that decision. And
Sure.
If they want to go deep down the rabbit hole and see every session that's part of it and every speaker that's part of it, then we send them over to the Map Your Show system. They can read about, what is the specific session? What are the talking points that are included here? What am I going to walk away with? But that's been a big piece and a big kind of change, because previously we had just been saying, yay, it's a conference and here's the general, or you can dive in deep. And so we kind of wanted to add a little bit of a highlight reel of sorts using the data via the API. And what's most nice about that is when I first started, we were manually editing it both in Map Your Show and on the website, which was very cumbersome, often meant that things weren't matching, that if we updated the title for something, we then had to go see, oh, did we update that only on the website or also on Map Your Show? So now everything is integrated and it's updating. I think we've got it running hourly, but it's been a huge game changer from that perspective. So it's something I'm very passionate about personally, and I think has helped drive the number of planners that are being created, as well as the number of sessions and speakers that are being added to those planners, which, to your point, Justin, means we can then measure how sessions are doing, and to what Josh was saying, then make decisions on the fly of, oh my gosh, these 2 AI sessions we have a ton of people adding them. Maybe that's content we want to do more of, or even we've made kind of pushes on site, even through the app, to say, hey, don't forget about this session, because we know one of our main stage sessions doesn't have very many people favoriting it, but we've got this really big name, so maybe people didn't know about it and it's fallen through the cracks. So yeah, it's been a good resource for us.
No, I appreciate that one. And let me mention this too. I know most of the folks watching this, your reg companies can probably help you take care of, if you need to set up wait lists for certain session rooms or sessions themselves or things like that. For what it's worth, Map Your Show, we now have the ability to set up, how many people can sign up for something within our planner, or when the wait list kicks on. Again, if you're doing that through regs, then ignore what I just said. But if someone's talking about that, great. All right, we're 35 minutes in. I promised people 30, 40 minutes, so I'm going to have to start winding this down a little bit. Josh, we're now getting close to the event. We've done all the marketing, communication, stuff like that. What is sort of happening, whether it's a week out, the day of? What are you all doing to prep your speakers coming into this?
I mean, once you're that close, you're just making sure that those loose ends that we've kind of talked about throughout, last bios and photos, final emails saying like, hey, here it is, are just making their way so you can land the plane once it's go time, right? Like there's definitely, 2-3 days out, you'll get a prep email sent out to every speaker so that they've once again saw all the information they've hopefully already seen. I mean, that's it's just the human nature side of this, right? Is at the end of the day, you've got to give people the same information in a little bit of different ways multiple times, because you just don't know where they're at in their world and what time they're going to pay attention to it, or which email they've saved that then they're going to go back to say, okay, here's all the information that I'm going to get. So you really get them all prepped for that. And then once they're on site, they've got they've been directed in these correspondences to a place. It's our speaker ready room, right? And that's where they can go and get themselves kind of centered on everything that's happening on the, at the show. Where am I speaking? How do I get there? Who's my, my contact on here? It says it's Steve, who's a what's it? Where's he? Where's he? When's he going to be here? Oh, he said he's going to meet me here. Hey, I get to shake his hand and do all that. Hopefully grab a bottle of water. Always want to try to have those in there. And the orchestrate piece that Valerie had mentioned earlier, if you didn't upload prior to in those speaker ready rooms, we've got computers where, even a half hour, 15 minutes before your session, you can load your presentation in there and it's going to be in the room for you. And you don't have to worry about bringing in your own tech.
All right, let me ask a question that was not on the list. So this is where it gets fun. Have you had any, and you don't have to name names or events or anything, any not so great sessions that maybe it was a speaker, something like that, to where you were like,
Never. They've all been
exactly. Always 300 people in every room, even the rooms that seat 15.
How do you deal with that afterwards? Is there something you would have changed in the prep? And again, I know everyone's not created equal, like the people that are going to speak are whatever, but any thoughts or tips to hopefully circumvent some of that on some level?
I mean, listen, first and foremost, it's empathy. It's being empathetic to the fact that we're all doing this to try to get to put you on a stage, to relay your information, your infotainment to as many people as possible, which might, further your business, but also furthers our industry. But we all understand that, we've got a show with 60, 70, 80, 90,000 people and hundreds of sessions happening in a show floor where there's a lot of commerce happening, that there's only so much time in the day for folks, right? So like, I think we've got data, Val, that says, the average conference attendee is going to go to like 3 or 4 sessions. And if we've got a vertical forum, it's usually got 20 plus sessions in it. So it's level setting going in.
Sure.
It's something that, if time allows, and Valerie and I have both had this thought, and I don't think I've discussed it yet, but hey, we're getting a lot of people saying they're coming to this session versus, hey, we're not getting a ton. That could be information that's relayed to speakers ahead of time just to get them kind of prepped. And we see as we go. I mean, again, all of our sessions always have 300 people in them, but still, if it doesn't quite meet needs of the speaker on there, we just want to be empathetic and be out front of it to say, obviously it's not what any of us set out to do, but here's some reasons why, and here's the best way we move forward.
Yeah, I also think there's been just, understanding and changes with, okay, well, we need to add better wayfinding. People couldn't find that theater. That's why attendee count was down. Or things like, oh, well, there was this main stage session happening at the same time, and the team tries to be mindful as they're programming other things. Or this is a conference where people tend to stay in the room the whole day, where this other conference, they plan to come in the morning and then they hop over to the floor in the afternoon, or vice versa. So I feel like there's also things that are not related to the actual session content, not related to the actual speaker or anything, that are just how are people managing things. Our show, like when it kicks off, most people want to be on the floor for that day. And so just kind of understanding how people are navigating things, and being mindful, thoughtful about that, as the team's making bigger decisions, that it's not all seen in a silo.
Yeah, awesome. All right, we promised some Q&A. There are some questions in here. I promise we'll respond to everything afterwards, right? So if we don't get to your question, great, but you're welcome to continue typing those in. I have one in here on other technologies you use before, on site, after, related to speakers, conferencing, anything that jumps out. And I realize some of this are with some of your other vendors and stuff like that. So anything that makes sense to throw into there for this?
I mean, from a workflow perspective, we are an agile organization. So we use agile to kind of build out our projects and to keep us on task. And that, emphasizes with the use of Trello boards and everything, where you sometimes can do BAU and waterfall stuff, but really that's for like your strategic vision moving ahead. And then, there's been multiple discussions of AI, and I think, Valerie, there's probably some certain things on the web side of things that you use that could probably fall under that little umbrella, possibly. But I know our organization, as we look at 2024 and beyond, there's gonna be a lot of lean into that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think, there are certain programs where, it gets complicated enough, and, we can download the report out of Map Your Show, but then for the team to make the best use of it, they're then taking that Excel and tweaking it and adding these other columns so they can do ultra crunchy math and make better decisions and understand things. So I think that is one thing of just, sometimes the tech is good, but you need to do more. And yeah, so, there's that piece. And then, I mean, again, with Map Your Show, we're having the speakers upload their headshots automatically, but oftentimes for the bigger pieces, especially, we need other image assets. We're doing a session on this HBO show, and so we get a high res version of their imagery from the show that we can then use in marketing materials, and we use a different platform to get that information. So really it's, knowing the needs and getting things the way you want it. And again, sometimes it's a phone call or an email just through your Outlook. So
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's tie a bow on this. We'll get folks out of here. Appreciate your time. Specifically, Val, let me start with you. And I have to tell you, the impetus for this next question came from a different webinar that I watched. It had a much more morbid take on it. So let me phrase it this way. If you were retiring tomorrow, not necessarily getting hit by a bus, is there a piece of advice that you were to pass off to whoever the next person is that would attempt to do what you're doing to prep for this session, conference, and speaker content?
I mean, I think, again, from a very technical perspective, it's doing all the legwork up front. I mean, Josh knows we've gotten into a cadence now where I go, okay, all right, it's time to think about what our categories are going to be for this year. What are our trends and topics that we are following this year, and getting that list as early as possible, because if we have that in advance when people are doing their submissions as a part of the call for speaker process, then that's already going to be tagged and pretty and beautiful, and his team can then see, oh my gosh, we have all this stuff coming in on topic X. Either that's really hot this year or that's really old now, and kind of making some determinations based on what's coming in that then can help with all the rest of the programming that they're trying to get from the sources that they have already, or finding those gaps and holes that are missing. But really, we've done a lot of work to say, okay, yes, we always collected this data, but does anyone care? Is that relevant? Is that necessary? Because every data point you have means someone has to tick that box. And so if it's not worthwhile, let's save the effort. And really asking, is this something attendees actually need and use? Is this something that will be useful to speakers? Is this something that's useful to exhibitors? And asking those questions every year to make sure, yes, this is necessary. Yes, this is helpful. And again, with Map Your Show, you can actually look at the data and see, oh, a bunch of people are clicking on this topic within our system. So, we can make determinations on what we need to program based on what people are showing us they are interested in.
Sure. No, love it. And Josh, on your end, how about a non-Map Your Show related piece? No, if you were to retire, what are you telling?
That I won the lottery. I'm super excited for myself, and don't call me tomorrow. But no, listen, it is first and foremost, stay calm and always come at things with positivity. Hiccups are going to happen always, invariably. It's just when there's so much data pouring in and so many people you've got to put in the right places, there's going to be some issues invariably somewhere. And how you come at those issues, how you react in the moment, how you react afterwards, and the way that you are with the people that those things have happened to, whether it's internal or external, feeds a lot into how that overall issue, one, gets dealt with, and two, is perceived once afterwards, right? Like, it's the biggest thing in the world that my PowerPoint didn't work in that moment, on that day, on that Tuesday, and a Tuesday a month from now, it's really not that big of a deal. So it's just making sure that you're empathetic when something like that happens, fix it as best that you can, and then follow up with, here's what I found out otherwise, but here's how we're going to make it better moving forward. So they understand that you've said okay to the problem, but also kind of put it in its place, right? And the other thing that I would say, which is something I picked up in the last couple of weeks, is, what we do with bringing people to conferences and then all of the stuff that happens on a floor and all the networking around it. It's a phrase I just learned, which is engineering serendipity. That's what you're doing. At the end of the day, with everything you're doing, if you're building a conference, you're engineering serendipity. You're putting the right people in the right place to have the right conversations, where hopefully jumping out of that, something new happens that moves your industry or the business forward. And just always keep that in mind, that that's the end goal of what you're doing.